Hello, my name is Joram, and I'm a core committer at Mattermost. Today I'll be talking about open source campaigns, what they are, what we use them for, and how to build one. Alright, so let's get into it. What do I mean when I say open source campaign? I mean a project with a clear start and end, completed by a number of open source contributors working together. Now, you might say just about any open source repository on GitHub falls under that definition. And sure, you might be right for the most part, but there are some key bits here that I want to emphasize about open source campaigns that are a little bit different. Um, so the first one is open source campaigns are generally run within a larger overall project. So for example, Mattermost is a large open source project, but within Mattermost, we have different projects or different goals we want to complete, and we run some of these as open source campaigns. Two, campaigns usually have a clear start and end. They need to be very well defined. They shouldn't be open-ended. They need to be completing one specific goal or a set of related goals. They can't be jumping from thing to thing and having feature creep. And then finally, the work needs to be done by multiple contributors working together. This isn't an individual effort, it's a team effort. A bunch of contributors should be working together. Open source campaigns are a way for us at Mattermost to leverage and work with our community to accomplish goals to improve Mattermost itself. So, what makes a good open source campaign? A good campaign comes from a goal or a set of related goals that will result in some sort of deliverable at the end. Generally, for us, this has been features or code refactoring, but it isn't necessarily exclusive to these. But that's number one. You got to have a goal. Number two is you have to complete the goal, and if completing that goal is a relatively largish task, you're probably good. If it can be completed in a few hours and fit into a single help wanted ticket, it's probably not the right size for an open source campaign. Some other good benefits are is if it can be split up into granular items of work, especially if those can be worked on in parallel. That really makes it a great candidate to be an open source campaign. It doesn't necessarily have to be done in parallel, but it really helps if multiple contributors can be working on the campaign at the same time without blocking each other. Let's look at a couple examples to help illustrate what a campaign looks like. So last year we built version 4 of our REST API as an open source campaign using our community for help. We had a very clearly defined goal, implement all the endpoints for version 4 of the API. It was a pretty big task, but thankfully we were able to easily split it into different work items. Each ticket contained the endpoint handler implementation, documentation for that endpoint, and then any accompanying unit tests. This campaign took us maybe 3 to 4 months to complete, but it was well worth it, and because of it, we have a better version of our REST API. Another example is migrating the Mattermost React.js web app to use Redux. This is actually an ongoing campaign that started months ago, and hopefully should be finishing in a month or two. But generally, the idea was the development team at Mattermost. We decided we wanted to move from the Flux pattern to using a more solid framework like Redux on our web app. So we had that. We had the very clearly defined goal. It was a large amount of work, and it's still ongoing. And thankfully, we were able to split that up into different work items. So luckily, we had many different components that were separate in the web app, and we could take each component, put those into its own ticket, and migrate them separately. Okay, now you've identified a good open source campaign. How does it work? How do you make it successful? Well, the most important part is you want to make it easy to contribute. Contributors need to know what the campaign is trying to accomplish, how to get started, and how to complete a work item. Document all that in an easy to find place. Have pull requests of already completed items to use as examples. And then create help wanted issues in your repository with links out to all that information. Another important part is to track the campaign's progress. This will help give you and your contributors a clear idea of what has been done and what work still needs to be done. And it also serves to motivate you and contributors. Celebrate when you hit milestones, maybe 50%, 60%, whatever. Just make sure to celebrate. It's very important. And then finally, be involved in the campaign. This isn't a fire and forget method to get someone else to do your work for you. Do some of the work yourself, answer questions, just make sure you're involved. And this is much easier to do if you have a place to chat, and a Mattermost channel would work great for that. Once again, we can look at the Mattermost REST API v4 campaign for some examples. So first we have some of the documentation used to develop for and work on the open source campaign for API v4. Has some stuff about adding an endpoint, how to document it, how to implement it, and all the required information for that. And here we have our API v4 campaign progress tracker. So basically, what this is, it's just it's a Google spreadsheet with a list of all the endpoints. We've got different tabs for the different resource and collections of the API. And you can see they're all marked green because we're done. But previously, we'd marked them different colors for if they were started, in progress, or complete. And it was a really easy way for us to keep track of what we had done, what we still needed to do, and it was a great way for contributors to see all that as well. And we also had our Mattermost channel for the campaign, which we actually still use today, which you can go visit if you like and take a look at. The last piece to building an open source campaign is to attract help. Some good ways to do that are creating help wanted tickets in GitHub issues. If you have an existing community, you can tap into there to find help. But personally, I've always found the best way to get help is to just ask for it. Never underestimate the power of asking for help. Maybe find someone who's contributed to a different campaign or related project in the past, and reach out to them directly and ask to see if they're interested in helping out. I've done this a ton of times, and you'd be surprised how many times people just say yes. Finally, don't get discouraged if no one immediately jumps in to help. It can take some time to get the ball rolling on these campaigns, but just because no one's jumping in immediately doesn't mean nobody wants to help. And maybe you just haven't found it yet, or they've been busy. Um, but don't get discouraged if nobody's jumping in immediately. All right, so that's it for my short presentation on building open source campaigns. If you want to learn more about Mattermost, you can join us on our pre-release server. Join the developers and contributors channels. You can check out our GitHub repo there. If you want to take a stab at one of our help wanted issues, go for it. And if you have any questions about this talk, about contributing in general, let me know. I'm at Joram on pre-release and at Wilander on GitHub. Thanks.